Hi, on creating and drawing images with OpenCV. Okay, so let's get started with drawing and creating images in OpenCV. So let's open this file here, number 3, drawing images, and it brings up our IPython notebook here. Good. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a black canvas image, and we're going to do this in 2 different ways, and I'll tell you why we're doing this in 2 different ways. Firstly, as you can see here, we're creating a black canvas here. We use NumPy zeros because we just want black. Remember, black is number 0. So black is the absence of all colors, be it red, blue, or green. So we use NumPy zeros here. We get an array of this dimension, which is 512 pixels by 512 pixels, and 3 dimensions here. So it's 3 layers of this. This is to indicate BGR or RGB color points, okay? So they're all going to be 0 here. So we're going to create a black color image using the color space. And in this case here, you see we left out a 3. That's because this is a grayscale. So you can just add this in here just to be more specific. Okay. And this is going to be a grayscale black image. So they're going to look exactly the same. Ta-da! You can see they're both black, both exactly the same. However, this image here has 3 dimensions and it can support color, while this one can't. This one will just support shades of gray. So it's something that's not super important right now, but it's just good to know that you can have different color spaces and how you create them in OpenCV. So sometimes, whenever you're really doing an operation that requires a grayscale image, you know what you have to do, and vice versa. So now, let's draw a line over our black square. And we do this by using cv2.line here, and this takes the following inputs here. This takes image, which is the image we're creating up here. It takes a starting point, ending coordinates, and it takes the color, and it takes the line thickness. Now it sounds quite simple, and let's see it in action. So let's run this, and this is exactly what we wanted. And why is it what we wanted? Because we specified 0, 0 as the starting point, that's this point here, and 511, which is the last point here. Now remember, OpenCV uses this top area here as the 0, 0 reference point. So as we go here, basically 255 is somewhere here. So now let's actually start our line at, say, 255 and 255, and let's see how it looks. And it's exactly as we expected. So that's brilliant. So now you've learned to draw a line. Now let's learn to draw a rectangle, okay? So to draw a rectangle, basically we create our same black canvas image here, and we have very similar starting inputs to our function, which is cv2.rectangle. So we have the input image. We have our starting vertex. This is on the top left side. This is the ending vertex, so the opposite vertex, which is going to be on our bottom right because of our coordinates we specified here. The color and the thickness. Now, let me just put a note about thickness here. Okay, so I just edited this here. So now it's correct and pertains to this one. So let's see what this does, okay? So let's draw this here, and we get a beautiful little triangle right here. Remember, this point is 100, 100, and this is 300, 250. This is the color here. It's a nice purple shade. And because it's negative, it means it's filled. So now let's actually put a value. Let's put value 10, and let's see how it looks. Ta-da! We get a rectangle with a relatively thick outline here, and we just created this. So that's pretty cool. Now, how about circles, okay? So in cv2.circle, we input our image canvas here, which we're just creating. I'm calling it a canvas, but basically it's an image. Any image would work. We can load images and draw lines or circles over it. It's just easier to do this over a black image. And you also learn how to create these black canvas images in OpenCV. One thing I neglected to tell you was that the second argument in np.zeros here is the data type. Remember, OpenCV uses basically unsigned integer 8. That's our 8-bit data type. And that's our data type for images by default in OpenCV, okay? So let's create our circle. And remember, this is the center of a circle here. This is going to be roughly more to the bottom right. This is going to be our radius. It's going to probably occupy maybe a third of the canvas. This is the color, and we're going to fill our circle. Yeah, so that's pretty much what we expected. A little more to the bottom right than I anticipated, but that's just because 350 is closer to 512 than it is to 0, 0, obviously. And we get a nice olive green color. So that's pretty cool. And remember, this same thickness argument applies here. If you were to change this to, say, 5, you'd get a nice outlined circle without the fill. So let's put it back. the fill. And now, what about polygons? Okay, so polygons are a bit different, okay? But the reason they're different is because you're not actually doing a shape. What you're doing is plotting a line of points. And how this function works, before I get to how we format our points here, we use the cv2.polylines. We have our input image, which we have created similarly in the previous cell blocks. Alright, so I just added in some lines here to explain how polylines works. So we have the image, we have the points, as I said. True indicates whether the image is a closed image or not. And if closed, that means we're joining the first point to the last point. If this is false, we don't join these 2 points. And if we don't join those 2 points, we can't actually make it like a filled image. Otherwise, this is not theoretically going to work. It has to be a closed image for it to be filled. And this is a color like we've seen before. So let's create this here. And we get this nice boomerang shaped image here. Now, what if I put this as false? Let's see what happens. See, it doesn't actually join these last 2 points here, which is basically change the shape entirely. So let's put this back, and now let's actually fill this here, experimenting with that. And it actually did not work here. Oh, that's actually a good error I found, because actually there's another function called cv2fillPoly, because actually polygons are by nature always meant to be filled like this. Otherwise, it can cause some logical issues, okay? So as we see, this is how it works here. Now the reshape here, now this is a point I wanted to mention to you guys before. The reshape here is necessary because CVT polys take these points here in a different format. And if you actually want to see that format, let's explore it here, okay? So let's take a look at first PTS here, all right? Now let's do a dot shape here, and we can actually see it's a 2-dimensional array right there. Now let's see what happens in this line. I always encourage you to explore examining your arrays like this, and you can see exactly what happens. It seems like we've added a 2-dimension in the middle here. Now the reason for this reshape basically is just to keep the format for several OpenCV functions inputs consistent. It can be confusing to beginners because it logically does not make much sense, to be fair. However, it's just to maintain a lot of cross-functionality between functions in OpenCV, which when you get more heavily into OpenCV, you'd realize it actually helps a lot. So that's it for polygons. Lastly, we're going to learn to how to put text, or basically, put text is the name of the function, but how to basically overlay text onto images. And it's quite simple and quite cool. So what we're doing here, we're using this CV2 function called putText, input our image. We can input the text here. You can put it in the string, or you can put it directly here. When I mean put it as a string, put it as a string variable like this out here. And there we go. And now we can just put that in here. And we can run this, and it's nice hello world right in the middle. So how did we get it in the middle? How did we get the font, and how did we get the color and size? Let's take a look. So quite simply, this is the second argument here. Bottom left is a starting point here. That's this coordinates here. When I mean bottom left, that's this point here. So normally we start here. In some OpenCV shapes, we're starting here now. That's a bit different, just remember that. And let's look at the other inputs here. So we have font. We have these 5 fonts to choose from. I'm not sure if they've added more fonts over the years. These were the fonts in OpenCV 3. Maybe OpenCV 4 has more. I'll have to check the documentation to be sure. Color, which we've seen before. Thickness. And font size right here. Left out font size. So that's all important. So now let's change a couple of these things. Let's just change the color. Randomly making color here. Let's change this to a larger font. Let's try, instead of complex, let's try simplex. And now let us make the thickness less. And now let's start it maybe a bit higher at say 25. Actually, no, let's go a bit lower. 155. There we go. And you can see it's a nicer looking font in my opinion. However, it's out of the screen. It doesn't fit anymore. And that can commonly happen when all of these things basically enlarge the font so that it no longer fits on the canvas. So what do? We can either adjust the font so that it fits on the canvas or enlarge the canvas. It's up to you. So probably easier right now to just enlarge the canvas. Let's make it 1000 by 1000. I'm not even sure if that's going to be enough, but let's check. Yeah, it is. So there we go. So that concludes this very important lesson on how to draw different shapes and how to put text on images. So in conclusion, what we've learned how to create a blank image canvas using the grayscale colorscape and a full colorscape as well. We've learned how to draw lines, rectangles, circles, and polygons, and we've learned how to overlay text onto an image. And now we move on to section 2, which is image manipulations and operations in OpenCV. Thank you.